Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of the Fair Housing Insiders, another segment of our Fair Housing 5 that we're bringing to you today. We thank you for being here, and we want to remind you, please give us that thumbs up. We appreciate so much your support of this channel. This is a complimentary fair housing education channel brought to you by the Fair Housing Institute. So thank you so much for your support. And in this episode, we're going to focus today on 5 unique challenges that property management maintenance professionals face on a daily basis. To kind of give you some highlights, here's some questions to consider. What happens if you're a maintenance pro and you're invited to a party? What happens if a resident wants to hire you? What happens, or rather, what should you do, or how can you help avoid the trap of steering? And what should you do if a resident approaches you and says, I'd like this particular parking space? And finally, what happens if you're doing some maintenance on an apartment and or on a unit of some sort, and they ask, can you give me a hand? I got some heavy furniture. I need a hand moving it. So what will you do in those scenarios? So stick around for the answer to all 5 of those questions. As always, we really appreciate Kathy Williams being with us here again today, and she's going to answer those questions and kind of give us some feedback on those scenarios. And just a little bit of an inside tip, the clips that you're seeing are segments from our maintenance course that we have available for you to take online. So let's take a look at our first clip, and we'll get Kathy's feedback on it. This is number 5, I'm having a party.
Here's another seemingly innocent question that can get us into fair housing hot water.
Jonathan, the question this brings forward is, what about socializing with your residents if you're a maintenance employee? Sometimes you spend so much time at work, that's the best place you can find friends, maybe girlfriends, boyfriends, and is that okay? And the general rule is no, it's not okay for a lot of different reasons, including the idea that if the neighbors see an employee spending a lot of time in one resident's apartment, being there in the evenings, being there on the weekends, dropping by during the day, maybe to have lunch or a beer or whatever, then that's going to look like favoritism. And that is never a good look for one employee to have with a resident. In addition, that also raises the possibility that if that friendship turns into a romance, then we could be in for a problem of claims of sexual harassment if that romantic relationship ends and one party, especially if it's the resident, is upset at the employee and wants to hurt the employee. That's an easy allegation to make. It's a terrible allegation to address if you're the employee or if you're the employer, which is the property or the management company. Nobody wants to get into those kind of situations. So the general rule is, the best practice is don't socialize with your residents.
Yeah, excellent tip. Don't socialize with your residents. And there's a lot more content related to that in the course as well. But a great recap and good reminders for all of our maintenance professionals. So that was our number 5. So thank you again for all those who are tuning in and giving us a thumbs up. We appreciate your support. So let's look at our number 4 situation. Can I hire you? What would you do? And Kathy, your feedback on if a resident poses that question to one of our maintenance professionals.
Did you realize that how you respond when asked, can I hire you this weekend to help me move some things, can result in fair housing problems?
This is one of those situations that when I train maintenance employees in an audience, I get about a 50-50 split on how many would accept that job offer for just temporary work for a resident and how many would refuse it. The bottom line is all companies, all properties need a policy on this. And I think from a best practice standpoint, the policy is don't take money from the residents in your property, even if they're willing to give it, because what that would entail is you being in their unit to perform that work when it is not in your job description. So you are in that unit putting together things, moving things, taking things out for them. And if something gets broken or you get injured during that time, is your company going to back you up on that? Because you don't have a reason that's related to your employment to be in that unit. So I see the chance for all kinds of problems that could arise from you taking a side job. In addition, my concern is, especially in some instances where we're talking about maybe an elderly resident, if they happen to drop the point that, boy, I just paid maintenance man Randy an extra $100. Now we have families wondering, why are you taking money from their elderly parent or aunt or whoever it is?
Right.
So the safest measure is just to very nicely turn down those jobs. And obviously, if you want to do extra work, go somewhere else to do it, not where you're working during the day for your property management company.
Yeah. Excellent feedback, Kathy. Thank you so much. Yeah, that sounds like it could lead to a very, very sticky situation and could hinder things overall. So appreciate your feedback on that. So that was number 4. So now let's move to number 3 of our Fair Housing 5, dealing with maintenance professionals and some of the challenges that they face on a daily basis. And our next scene relates to steering. So let's take a look at the scene, and Kathy will get your feedback on it.
There are several situations where steering may occur, and while it is the leasing team who initially works with a prospect while they choose their apartment home, it is possible that you may be asked questions by prospects or residents, so it's helpful to know about the most common types of steering that can occur.
The idea of illegal steering in fair housing is when an employee of a property either encourages or discourages a prospect, a resident, from living either in that property or maybe in a specific unit in that property or area in that property. And probably the most common example of this that maintenance employees face is when someone is on the property. Maybe you don't know who they aren't a resident, perhaps they're a guest, perhaps they're a prospect, perhaps they're a tester, and they turn to you and say, what kind of people live here?
Yeah.
And how do you answer that question is the real issue. And what you don't want to do is answer that question with anything that has something to do with the person's protected category, such as, how many Asians do you have living here? How many Hispanics? How many whites? How many African Americans? Those are the kind of questions you do not want to answer, especially with specific facts. So usually the best answer to that is, hey, why don't you go down to the leasing office and let them talk to you about that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Another sticky situation and another testimony, Kathy, I'm sure you agree on why maintenance professionals, why it's so important for them to have fair housing education, fair housing training, even if they've taken it before. You know, there's these reminders serve as a valuable tool to keep that fresh in their mind so they can avoid a potential fair housing violation. So thank you so much for that. So that was number 3 and leads us to our number 2 item of some unique challenges that property management maintenance professionals face on a daily basis. And what happens if a resident comes and asks about a preferred parking space and requests that of you. So let's take a look at a clip and we'll get your feedback on that potential challenge, Kathy.
What if you're approached by a resident asking if you can arrange for him to have a reserved parking space?
One of the most complicated topics in the whole arena of fair housing is reasonable accommodations. And residents who may get assigned a parking space, a specific parking space that's just for them, may be one of those reasonable accommodations. And we cannot expect that a maintenance employee automatically knows about any of that. That is usually done out of the leasing office, and it isn't done after discussing it with the remainder of the staff. So what do they know about why some people get parking spaces and others don't? And if they get asked that by a resident, how should they respond? And that really is one of those very practical training things that need to be discussed with your employees, because they should be careful how they respond. They can't just say, oh, I'm sure you can get one too, go talk to the manager kind of thing. They need a specific way of responding to that doesn't give away confidential information about the residents who have been assigned those spots, and doesn't discourage the resident from going and talking to whoever is in charge of making those decisions on your property. So it's important to cover those kind of statements or questions that are aimed at maintenance employees, because we forget sometimes they're the ones the residents see much more often than the leasing staff, so they need to be prepared for those questions.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you for kind of tying it into how the whole site team needs to be on the same page and work together. And I'm sure many of our listeners are not only maintenance professionals, but the training team, the human resources team. So we appreciate you being here. It shows your dedication to your team and how important it is to keep those reminders and what they need to do in those situations, reinforce those best practices. So great tips, Kathy, on what happens if a maintenance professional is approached about a reserved parking space. So that takes us to our number one challenge that you can see in property management with maintenance professionals. And there are others. The course covers them. We're just covering 5 today, but there are others that we know you maintenance pros go through on a daily basis. But we know these are some of the more ones that recur quite often. So our number one item that we're going to talk about is, earlier we talked about, what happens if someone approaches you and wants to hire you. Now we're just going to look at it from the perspective, you're performing a work order. You're already in the unit. You're already in the apartment. And then someone asks you, I have a heavy piece of furniture. Would you be able to help me move it? So, Kathy, let's look at our clip and we'll get your comments and feedback on that.
Thank you so much for getting the sink unclogged for me, John. It was driving me crazy. While you're here, I was wondering if you could do me a quick favor. I need to get this couch down the stairs. Someone's on their way to pick it up. I just can't move it by myself. Would you mind giving me a hand really quick?
Jonathan, this example is so common for maintenance employees. Again, when I talk to them, I hear so many different examples. And what I would call this is maybe doing a favor for a resident who asks. And depending on the resident, depending on how much the employee likes that particular resident, depending upon whether maybe the resident is elderly or maybe has some kind of disability, it's very difficult for an employee to say, no, I'm not going to help you. But the reality is that probably needs to be the answer, said in a very gracious way. I would love to help you with that, but I'm so sorry. It's against our policy. and I'm not permitted to help you with that moving furniture or changing a light bulb or hanging a picture or putting together a bookcase or any one of 100 different favors. We have to go back to the idea that in fair housing, in many instances, the answer is consistent treatment. And if you're going to do that favor for one resident, are you willing to do it for all your residents? And if you're not, and if it's not part of your job description, you shouldn't be doing it. Again, what if you are moving that couch and you knock over a priceless lamp? Or you, again, as I said earlier, injure your back. Be aware that if it's not part of your job, your company doesn't have to cover you on workers' comp. And sometimes we forget all of those complications that have to do with employment. So the general answer is I would certainly find a way of being very nice about it, but don't be doing favors for one resident that you're not willing and supposed to be doing for all your residents as a part of your job.
Yeah, excellent feedback. And I love how you scripted that, how you worded it. Out of the goodness of their heart, they would be inclined to. But a lot of things to really think about that could make their job more complicated and potentially have a fair housing violation. So some fantastic reminders. So Kathy, thank you again. We so much appreciate you joining us and providing your expertise and feedback on today's topic on property management maintenance professionals and the challenges that they face on a daily basis. So thank you again for being here.
Good to be with you again.
So remember, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone listening, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. We're really seeing a lot of people subscribe to the channel, and we appreciate that. Before you go, we would really appreciate if you can give us that thumbs up, show that you've appreciated this video and the hard work, especially on Kathy's part, taking her time to share with us her knowledge and years of experience with all of us so that we can do a better job of maintaining fair housing compliance. And be sure to check out our other episodes. We have a whole library available to you on our Fair Housing Institute channel. Use these videos maybe for your next fair housing training session as a guideline for a good discussion. Be sure to check us out at fairhousinginstitute.com and see all of our course options that are available with you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll see you on our next show.